Hello and welcome to Navigating to Success. I'm your host, Jeff Carlton, certified focal point business and executive coach. And I'm extremely pleased to have a fellow Montanan join me today, Benjamin Winters. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
So, CEO and co-founder of Population Explorer um, and Acros, which we may or may not get to, but let's talk about Population Explorer first. Tell everybody what you do there.
You bet. Yeah, thanks. So, Population Explorer tries to solve a critical gap in the marketplace right now that faces, at least in terms of our current focus, a lot of retail site selection personnel and franchisors that need to know where their customers are before they make heavy investment decisions of placing new sites, new infrastructure, and that's everything from a coffee shop to a billboard, what have you. And at present, accessing that information, where are my customers, is quite heady and technical. You oftentimes need to be able to wade through decades old census data and understand advanced GIS analysis with software platforms that are past your average consumer's skill set to use. And what we're doing in response to that is providing high resolution customer location data in a very easy to use format so that everyone from your mom and pop laundromat proprietors up to your Fortune 500 executives can, within several minutes, understand precisely where their target customers are and place confident infrastructure decisions accordingly. So that's our goal.
That's pretty cool. And I imagine that, well, I'd like to think that it's a little bit easier to do now than it was 5 years ago or 6 years ago with some of the digital tools. Um, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about I mean, so you founded the company back in 22.
Correct.
So you've been going for 3 years, and it looks like you've had quite a growth trajectory with it. What has changed specifically since we kind of dumped AI onto the stage here about 13, 15 months ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, Not much when it really comes down to it. The reason why PopX is going to rise or fall really comes down to our ability to understand our end users, the clients, and know the decisions they need to make and be able to add value to that decision-making process. And fortunately, at least at present, AI can't read our minds. We we might be on a clock with that one, but there is no one who understands our customers the way that we understand our customers, as long as we're making it a daily discipline to stay in front of them, initiate conversations, and try to live in their environment as best as we can. Um, and
Just
so, yeah, go on, Jeff.
well, I was just going to ask from a data analysis, data parsing standpoint, any impact there?
What AI will eventually do in the GIS space or the demographic space is something that's really important from our standpoint, and that is removing agency. So, part of our mission in this space and where the market gaps currently are is we're trying to give people answers without those people having to take a PhD class in software to come up with the answers. And
Right.
and right now, customer analysis and demographic analysis, in a lot of ways, requires people to have a PhD before they can get the answers to their questions. AI is going to increasingly bridge that gap by making the question answer process more conversational and less point and click and filter and sort and rank, which we're eager for that to come onto the scene because it's right in line with what we're doing already. And we do that primarily through relationship building and then using those relationships to help define products that better solve our customers' problems.
Yeah, and you've gone back to it a few times, and I can't emphasize that enough. It comes up in almost every episode that we do about relationship building and asking questions, understanding what your customers' needs and desires are. And so we're not going to get replaced by machines. I think.
Space.
Um, you've got to have that human factor if you're doing human interactions and transactional relationships. Um, Apart from a vending machine, right? Uh, where it's probably a little bit more personal. You're like Starbucks. If you look at their brand, they're really trying to sell you an experience, not
Right.
just a cup of coffee. So, uh, yeah. What? So, how big are you now? I mean, you've grown. You're on a growth trajectory. How many employees and how are you structured?
So we have a team of, I guess there's 7 engineers in Serbia right now. We've got a couple of engineers in Ethiopia. It's myself and my co-founder, and then we have, gosh, a whole pool of data scientists that come in on an ad hoc basis to support client requests on an as-needed basis. Um, and we're all over the world. We have a total of, I think we just crested 18,100 users of the application right now. 60% of those are outside of the US. And I would say the biggest use case that we have is in that retail selection or franchising space on the private sector, where you've got critical infrastructure decisions that need to be made. Oftentimes, what happens is these franchisors, maybe you've come up with the best recipe for a new cheeseburger. And you set up a shop maybe in your hometown, Jeff, in Great Falls, and it's just going gangbusters. You got a line out the door every morning. You sell out of your cheeseburgers by 2 p.m. in the afternoon every day. And you think, gosh, I bet you I could do this again somewhere else. And ultimately, that thinking leads to you saying, I bet I could sell my recipe and my restaurant model to a different individual in a different part of America, and they could make a run at it as well. And that's kind of the core of franchising, how it works. Obviously, it gets more nuanced than that. But when you get to that process of saying, you can take the guts of my business, the core of what makes me successful, and I'm going to let you replicate this in another area, you're giving that person rights to an area. You're giving them rights to a certain amount of customers. Like you can have Seattle all to yourself, or you can have Great Falls all to yourself. And that's a great illustration. Seattle has an incredible absorption capacity for restaurants, much
Yeah.
different probably than Great Falls. And what we're doing is trying to make that difference easily accessible to the people that are selling off their concepts so that when they say, I'm going to carve off this new territory like Seattle, I can have a real sense of actually what that is worth relative to a place like Missoula, where I'm from, or Great Falls, where you are. And they can
Sure.
monetize that value accordingly. Um, Doing that with the current tools that are in the marketplace is, I mean, you might as well have a blindfold on because it's really challenging. It's like a guessing game, and we're trying to increase the visibility
I think that's how most entrepreneurs feel about anything is that they're,
there.
I got this great plan. I'm going to work less and I'm going to make more money. Huh. It
Yeah,
doesn't always quite pan out that way.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So um, it's been really weird post pandemic, especially here in Montana. Do you see, and I'm really curious about the science behind what you're doing, which might be above the scope of what we're talking about, but have you seen any shifts in the databases that you're using because of population centers moving um, and demographics relocating? Because I think we've seen
Absolutely.
a ton of relocation.
Well, and this is exactly why the data sets that we're offering are unique and critical to people making these kinds of decisions. So, um, under normal conditions, people will look to understand demographics to a place like census, and that can vary from country to country. And what happens with a census is every 10 years, they run out and do a small sample of the population. And then for every year after that 10-year period or between the two 10-year periods, they'll basically model out what they think would be a normal growth rate or migration patterns in that particular country. And then, but you always have these events that change the course of migration, that make people do things
Right.
differently. And what we're doing is we're running these high resolution satellites across the entire globe a dozen or so times per year, and we're telling you from space exactly what we're detecting on Earth for that year. And so we're updating our data sets annually, and you're going to see a real difference between what a 10-year model would produce versus what you can actually experience on the ground. And so there's nothing like bad data to really screw up a good business decision, and that's what we're trying to help people avoid.
No, and you're spot on with that because it's and gosh, even a 1 year update. Um, how much of it is keyed on online activity or cellular activity, or is it all optical?
So it's all optical. We're using light patterns and these satellites, gosh, I mean, if I told you what they could detect from space, I think everyone would be wearing hooded sweatshirts around and very careful about what they
Ah,
get inside.
after 35 years in the military and flying fighter jets and stuff like that, I might know a thing or two about
Yeah,
that.
you probably know better than most. That's right. So these satellites are able to pick up human movement patterns quite readily. And it's a complicated process coming from the imagery down to actual numbers that you can see and use in a software application. It takes us about 9 months to crunch the numbers, run those through our machine learning models and some of our early AI before AI was a thing, patterns to then produce something that we think has a good level of accuracy, and it's standardized globally. That's the other thing that's really fascinating about this. When you
Yeah.
have multi-country retailers and they're trying to triangulate, okay, what does it mean to place a site in the US and also in Mexico and also in Canada? We're giving them one common data set they can use to reference that across multiple locations.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Let's let's shift gears a little bit about how you got started,
Right.
um, and and how this stood up. So you're coming up on your third birthday here. Um, you've been going. What? Um, well, two-part question. It's bad to stack questions, but two parts. What got you and your co-founder inspired to take on this project? And what did you find were your biggest challenges starting out?
Gosh, great questions. Um, So my co-founder and I purchased this technology stack from an organization that had been using similar technology to support development decisions overseas. So countries and governments that need more visibility about population movements so they understand where disease risk might be, for example, or
Sure.
where gaps in the education system might be. And that's actually a domain that I'm very familiar with. My wife and I started another company called Across, which has been supporting multiple low and middle income countries for the last 18 years with public health and education campaigns. So it's a field that is close to my heart and that I understand quite well. What attracted me and my co-founder to this particular stack was that it both served a lot of those low and middle income country governments with their primary needs, but it also served the private sector. And so this is a rare example of a business opportunity where you can create value in the private sector. And by creating that value and sharpening a product that serves these business clients, you're also directly impacting the ability of, say, the country of Malawi or Tanzania or Zambia to to ship out more malaria medications to some of their vulnerable populations out in rural areas. And it's rare in my experience that you see that kind of opportunity. And so that really inspired us to take this on and make it work.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of challenges, uh, I would say that the primary driver of success was also our primary challenge, and that is if you know your end users, you know your ultimate clients, and you can live in their world for a day or two, ultimately you should be able to find something of value that you can offer back to them in terms of a
Right.
product or service. And it took us a while to settle down on a segment of end users or clients that we wanted to focus on because as you can imagine, when we purchased this technology stack, we realized, oh my goodness, we have access to population data for the entire world, down to the extent where I can draw a shape in any corner of the world, literally just draw a shape in this application, and it will tell me within seconds how many people live there. And it's updated annually. And you think, gosh, we could use this for risk management. We could use this for military applications, like you were alluding to earlier. We could use this for humanitarian crisis planning. We could use it. And so the list of potential clients was about, 100 miles long. Um, and it took us probably a year and a half before we settled in, at least on the private sector space, on that retail site selection and franchising use case, at which point we were able to really take our product from being just a good idea into a
Right.
real point of value to those users. And we're still experimenting and iterating on that theme. I don't think we've quite maximized the value we can provide yet, and each iteration gets us a little bit closer to that.
It's interesting because gosh, we could talk for way more than 15 minutes about this. You know, doing the franchising and developing and revenue generation, capital, providing also a useful service. But with that requires infrastructure. And so there's also those infrastructure requirements and opportunities that, I mean, building infrastructure is good for people that build infrastructure, but ultimately you're building communities,
That's right.
and helping them uh, grow into something healthy instead of a slum. Because we see a lot of emerging uh, emerging communities that, well, they're third world or worse.
That's right.
This is pretty cool work that you're doing. Um, so give me a look into your future. What do you think you look like in uh, in 2 or 3 years?
It's a great question. We want to get even further in front of some of these questions that our users have. So when you're thinking about whether you're going to drop $5 million on a new site, and that site's going to be located in Missoula, perhaps, or maybe you want it to be in Fort Collins, or maybe you want it to be in Houston. Um, it's not just how many people are located there right now that is important to you, but how many people will be there in 3 to 4 to 5 years. And so we
Right.
want to get better at population forecasting. That's one thing. The second major domain we want to crack is in AI, and using AI to even improve the agency problem that we have, more than we've already done. We want someone to be able to click a button on their computer and ask the application a few questions, and then a map lights up right in front of them without any further points or clicks or anything of the like, and gives them workable targets to look for their next franchise expansion venture. So there's a lot that we're working on right now, but all of it comes back down to trying to make the lives of our customers easier. That's where it will
Yeah.
ultimately go.
Um, no, very cool. Um, Here's your opportunity for a shameless recruiting plug. Are you hiring? And if so, who are you looking for?
We are always hiring. We're always looking for good engineers that understand AI and also understand how to work in a team. We're looking for people that are passionate about selling these kinds of solutions to franchisors or retailers. Anyone in the SaaS sales industry that wants an exciting opportunity to come on board and work in this particular space, we're always reviewing CVs for that. Those are the two major domains we're looking for right now.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for where you're going. So last question before we wrap this up. Um, what is You've done a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, you guys need to look up Benjamin Winters and what his journey has been. He's got his fingers in a lot of different pots of stew. Um, what would be the one uh, nugget of wisdom or advice you would give an aspiring or new entrepreneur?
Meet with your clients. That's it. I mean, and Elon Musk has great guidance on when to invest in packaging a solution, when to invest in the R&D process, and all those sorts of things. But But I would say that the more time you spend in front of your end users, the clients that you want to try and sell to, without selling them something, just understanding the questions they ask, the process they go through, why their day is good or bad, the more success you're going to have in rolling out your first product or service that you're trying to package up. So,
Couldn't agree
yeah,
more. Investing in the human capital is often very much overlooked in the numbers game. So, Ben, how do people find you? Um, another shameless plug opportunity.
you can go to populationexplorer.com, all one word. You can go to akros.com, akros.com. And we're both of those companies are highly visible on LinkedIn. So feel free to tune in, follow our pages for more information and updates. And yeah,
Awesome. Well, thanks, and thanks everybody for watching this episode of Navigating to Success. We'll see you next time. Ben, thank you again.
you bet. Thanks, Jeff.